Welcome to another tutorial. Today I thought I would go through how to create an image from a preconceptualized vision. The image today was taken on New Year's Eve during a time lapse, and the concept I had in mind was to give the sensation of really being in a light tunnel, and also to convey a sense of, I guess, busyness in Adelaide, which would usually actually be quite hard to get because I've tried this at night before and there just isn't enough traffic around to generate it. So in terms of actually on the scene, I had set up the other camera, the 7D, to take a time lapse, and the settings I had for the 7D were to take 5-second continuous exposures because I estimated that I wanted to be at the scene for about half an hour for 10 seconds of footage. Now, I didn't want to use the frames from the 7D to generate this picture because a lot of the exposures would have light trails just by chance alone. So that's why I brought out the 5D Mark II to take dedicated stills of the night as well. In terms of trying to generate the actual look that I wanted, I had to firstly get into a position that was safe, and I have been in this spot multiple times before. Now, if you picture this and think that it looks very unsafe, this is actually along a pedestrian crossing, and the distance between the tracks on either side is what it would be for a bus stop. So I actually considered myself to be quite safe, and unless the tram was going to derail itself, I was never going to get hit by it. So after setting up the 7D, I then set up the 5D Mark II to take the dedicated stills, and before firing off the shots, I timed how long it took from the tram to go from a red light to past the position where I was, which was about 10 seconds. So knowing the settings from the time lapse on the 7D, I then worked out that at ISO 200 f16 was about 10 seconds for that trail to go from the traffic light to past me, and similarly it was a similar duration for the tram to go past me from the opposite direction heading away from me. So once I have had those two frames, and I didn't actually take very many, the next step was to merge them or exposure blend them in Photoshop. So I exported them, which I already have done according to a preset naming, and then we move on to the Photoshop stage of the creation of the image. So welcome back to the next part of the tutorial. As you can see, I've got both of the images now in Photoshop open, and we want the light trail on the left merged in with the light trail on the right from this image. That would involve using layer masks. So just to simplify things, Control A to select all of one image, Control C to copy it, and Control V to paste it onto the other scene. And I'll get rid of this one so it's faster to work with. And one thing when you're blending exposures is to make sure that your images are completely aligned. If they're not, you could end up with a lot of post-processing that has gone to waste essentially if you don't look very closely. So if you zoom up fairly close and click on the eyedropper button, so apart from the slight movement in the tram line, you can see that the Christmas tree is very much aligned. If you had to align the two layers because of very slight tripod movement, which tends to, well, it can happen in seascapes if your tripod isn't 100% secured, the way I do it is to select both layers, go to Edit, Auto Align Layers, and use the Auto function. So I'll cancel it because I won't need to in this case, and I'll zoom back out to fit the screen. So the next step is to include from this top layer the right hand curve, and to exclude the left hand side, which is what we want from the bottom layer. So click on the layer mask, which is down here, and now for a very simple mask, which you can do effectively for images with straight horizons or where the transition is a straight line, just use the gradient function. The shortcut for that is G. Now, if you then use the Shift button, that allows you to drag the cursor in a dead straight line. Okay, I won't do it up there, but you can see what happened there. From where I started dragging was where it wanted to delete the image, and from where I ended it is a transition phase in between there. Okay, so as we said, what I wanted was to include the right hand side and to exclude the left hand side. So to do that, to exclude the left hand side, start on the left and move to the right. In this case, we don't need a gradual transition because the transition point is all where I'm pointing my cursor now. So I'd start, just as an estimate, start here and move across to there, and that's your gradient. Okay, you can move it across further if you like. You see there's a very straight line of transition there. Alright. So the beauty of doing this is that you can now refine it further using the B, the brush. So enlarge your brush to a fairly large one if it's just a very coarse masking that you want to do. And what we want to do is we want to include the rest of that light that's there. So you would include it by using the white part of the brush, and in terms of opacity, I very rarely go more than 33% just so it's a bit gradual. So you can see now you're just including the rest of that light, so it's a bit more natural from the right hand side tram. Okay. And similarly, the end of this trail on the left hand side you can try and include further by changing it to the black, so deleting the parts of the image from here by doing that. Okay. Now, if you have a look at other parts of the image, are you happy with that part of the light compared to what you get from the bottom? If you compared to what you would have in the frame. So disable the layer mask by pressing Shift and left click on it. I actually think that the trail from the top image is better than the trail from the bottom image, and it has less of this messy white stuff going on, which is a reflection in the tram. So once again, if you want to refine it further, simply use the brush and you want to include what was in that top layer, so change it to white, and you can gradually paint it all in while leaving the trails that you want to keep. Okay, so that was just a very coarse way of masking to show blending of exposures for different elements of a scene which actually have the same overall exposure. And after going through my usual workflow, we ended up with an image that ended up looking like that. So thank you very much once again for listening, and the main points I wanted to take home were firstly safety and positioning for taking your shots, conceptualizing what you want to do, make sure you time what you want to do if it's a long exposure, and then in blending use the G button and the Shift to make a straight gradient with varying levels of transition. Thank you very much once again.